What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman, and with me today we've got Damien Dubose. Damien, it's a pleasure to have you. How are we doing this morning or this afternoon? Excuse me.
No, no problem. I'm good. I'm good. Nice to be here. Appreciate you having me, and look
Right
forward
on.
to a cool discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell me about your book. Tell me about how you got into podcasts, and let's get at it.
The book just came about from me getting it more into like philosophy and psychology. For by profession, I'm a financial professional, right, by trade. And so, and later in life, I got into coming out of my getting my MBA. I got into like some psychology because they did some aptitude testing and things like that, and I've always kind of been interested in that. And then also got into more philosophy, just reading some books and came across some different ways of thinking. So at some point in time, I ran into two different books, two different schools of thought, I guess, two disciplines. One was psychology, one was philosophy, and I just saw these 3 points through these two different, these through two different systems from these thinkers. And I'm thinking like, well, why haven't I learned this? Or why haven't we put this like in a position in society to where we can use these things? Because I always hear people having insights from psychology, and I'm not hearing as much as I used to hear about philosophy or what we used to have from philosophy that much anymore. But I'm just thinking like, well, why aren't we using these frameworks? So that just kind of led to the book. I wanted to learn more about it. I started writing, started learning more, and then the book kind of turned out to be something that I didn't intend for it to be, but it was just a learning experience. So that's what it was.
I don't think it's an accident that we're not taught about philosophy in schools. Like, they don't
You don't
want to
think so?
have they don't want people having morals in this world. They like to just pay attention to sports. Like just watch the football game and don't worry about what we're doing over here. Like I
Yeah.
had a fun like conversation with my little brother the other day and I was like, why do you think sports are so popular? He's like, oh, people like sports. And I'm like, well, also, like, the people running the world don't want you watching what they're doing. They don't want you having any part of that, and, like, you know, one of the things I always say is, like, we don't give our ancestors enough credit for how smart they are. Like when you pick up an old
That's true.
philosophy book, like I recently went through college as like a retraining after I got hurt. So they like sent me, I got paid to go to college. I would never pay to go to college at this point, like after
O-
watching like what
okay.
it does to everybody. But like I ended up taking this philosophy course. It was like probably the hardest class that I took while I was in there. It was interesting.
Okay.
And we went through like some of the older Greek philosophy and you read it and you're like, "Holy shit." Like these people figured it out 2,000 years ago, and it was what was the guy's name? The guy that killed his father and married his mother and like you read these stories and like one of the most interesting things about it was like seeing how like I feel like I have a decent like moral compass and like a background in like philosophical thinking, getting into like a libertarian type mindset. Like that's a very philosophical ideology. And like you learn about natural rights and things like that. And so it's one of these deals. So like in this first book, the guy, the king says, well, we just had this war and you're not allowed to bury anybody from the opposing side that lost the war. And I don't remember any of these people's names, but anyways, one of the
Right.
the lead characters in the story decides, screw the law, I'm going to bury my brother. That's the right thing to do because she had a brother on the other side of the war. And you see these people in the classroom being like, well, she deserves to get punished. Like, it was the law. And you're just like, oh my
Right. Yeah.
gosh. Like you,
Yeah.
and by the end of it, it's a three-part series. And in the first part, the king seems to the untrained mind to be a little bit, like an okay guy. He's just laying down the law and that's what he does. And by the end, you can tell that he's just a monster, a sociopathic monster. And then their complete shift in thinking, and it's like, hey man, you guys have to apply these principles throughout the entire story, regardless of who's in charge and what he looks
Right,
like and how he acts. Like, you have to have these principles and you have to hold strong to them and you have to
right,
apply them to every portion of the story. And I think
right.
that was one of the most frustrating parts of like being in school was like just watching this younger generation going, well, it's the law. If our rulers say that it's so, then it must be so. And I don't
Yeah.
think it's an accident that people think that way. I think that we're probably programmed to think like that all the way through grade school, high school, and into college.
I mean, I think if you look at history, really, I think the percentages are probably the same, right? Like, I don't think the majority of people. I think most of the majority of people did think like that, and I think that
Oh,
the
I'm sure they
progression,
did, yeah.
yeah, and so the evolution for humans to me is to get more and more people to get beyond that type of thinking. But so to your point, I think maybe at some point in time we had like a regression. Maybe the average wasn't climbing, and maybe the average started regressing of people who were able to escape that concrete style of thinking. But I think you bring up a good point. It's just that there has to, there are principles that you need to apply, but you need to. But what I would offer to that is we need to really plan out or basically articulate how we got to those principles because really we make all of this stuff up,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah,
and
that's
so
like
we
the
have to
tenet of
justify.
of libertarian philosophies. All this stuff is fake. Like, the only place that government actually exists is in the mind of human beings. Like, the stuff is all fake. We just made it all up and apply it as we see fit.
Right. Right. Yeah, but some of the stuff is justified. It's for a purpose. If you can show your reasoning, and that's the whole point. Some people, but that's part of my book to basically lay out a clear argument and some reasoning, as opposed to those who may say, "Well, I want to do this," and don't provide any reasoning or any type of standard principle to make their argument on.
Yeah, you always gotta look at everything through first principles. Like, once you I think there's very few people in this world that actually know what they believe in and why. I think a
It's
lot of
true.
people just kind of float through life and figure it out as they go. Like, my parents were very young when they had me. My mom was 20 years old, my dad was like 22, 23. They didn't understand
Mm.
anything that was going on in the real world. Like, we were going to dirt bike races every weekend and not paying attention to anything around us whatsoever, and that's a good life. Like, you can float through life that way and have a great time and not really worry about things. And for me, it wasn't really until I got hurt and kind of was stuck in the house and ran out of things to watch on TV that I like kind of got into podcasts and was like, "Oh wow, there's
Wow.
actually more to life than just like watching sports every weekend." And like, I need to figure out who I am and what I believe in and why. And interestingly for me, like, I've always been the way I am. Like, nothing's really changed the person that I am all that much throughout my life. Like, I went through a phase of being a drug addict and did some horrible things in life, which I'm not proud of, but I've always kind of thought the same way. And it was really
Right.
interesting to like finally get on the internet and think like, "Oh, wow. Not only am I not crazy for kind of thinking this way, but like this might be the proper way that things are supposed to be done." And you kind of like learn a bit more and go, "Oh, like, hey, this is actually a justified way to think." Like, I always as a kid, I would look at the
Yeah.
Democrats and the Republicans and go, "Well, none of these people like actually represent what I believe in or how I live my life or what I
Right.
think is just and moral." Like, they both sides like hate me for different reasons. And I kind of just always went through life thinking like these people are nuts and there's nothing that can be done. And I still kind of think that way. Like, the people running the world are nuts and there's not much that people like me and you can do. Like, we, you know, do things like this and try and help people to think in a proper way and kind of, you know, find their principles and hopefully stay true to them, and that's, about the best we can do at this point.
I mean, I think that we've seen some successes. I mean, I just think that people have to not necessarily plan it out, but you do have to understand about how to create these frameworks and also how to get them into like the mainstream consciousness in some type of way. But
Yeah,
a lot of it, what I believe, and it's just my belief, when you talk about like how um, developed our ancestors were or people who came before us, I just think a lot of that intelligence was just rooted in this necessity, right? Because it's people say, well, we've solved the problems of production through capitalism and all this, and not just capitalism, but just solving the problem of production. But it's just a surplus. We just got a lot of people who don't necessarily have to engage, or their life isn't always on the line like it was
yeah,
back in the day,
yeah.
you know. And so you had to really, you had to really focus because it was could be a life or death situation easily, you know. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, it's, specialization of labor has been, kind of the key to the human race is producing things by becoming an expert at that one thing that you're good at, and
Right.
I think that's kind of been the same for a really long time. We've found out, even you go back to hunter gatherers and you had people who hunt, you had people who gathered, you had people who cooked and build things, and it's been a it's been a wild ride for people. I do agree with you though that like I think, there while there was some very smart people back, in Greece and even further back into, other antiquities. I think the majority of people have probably been about the same as we are today, where they're not really paying attention. And I would say that right now the average person is smarter and more plugged in than the average person was 2,000 years ago. I mean, the average person 2,000 years ago wasn't really reading or writing. They were just kind of doing their part in the labor field and building swords or whatever the hell they were doing. They weren't they weren't
Yeah,
really paying attention to what the philosophers were saying and doing. And I think that's, I think like podcasts have probably been one of the biggest things to change that in the modern day. Like radio has existed for a long time, and
true.
radio was heavily, you know, siloed off to where a show like this wouldn't really exist on the radio 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. There was a line, and they were very good at filtering out the people who were saying things that the ruling elite didn't want people to hear. And that's changing. When I was a kid, if you would have said I wanna have a TV show when I grow up. People go, "Good luck, man. You're not gonna have a frigging TV show. That's
Right, yeah.
expensive, like, you have to go to college and learn how to act or learn how to be a journalist, and, then you have to know the right people and blah, 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 blah." But now
Yeah.
with a couple thousand bucks and a little bit of knowledge on a computer, I've got my own TV show, and I'm not even great with computers. Like, I had to figure this thing out as we went, and it's been a wild ride doing that, but it's not that hard. And now
Right,
anybody
right.
can have it.
It's
Like,
accessible.
I think that's a good sign for the future. Like, I think that younger people are more engaged with what's going on in the world today than they were when I was a kid. Um,
Mm,
like I remember like, when 9/11 happened, I was in 10th grade or something like that, and
mhm.
no idea what was going on. Went
Right.
through, the whole propaganda, through the George Bush administration and just kind of was like, "Oh, you're with him. You're either with him or with the terrorists." And it was like, "Well,
Right, yeah.
obviously, I'm not a terrorist, so, like, let's go destroy this country." And I think younger people
Yeah.
are a little bit more aware of that today, which is a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be aware, and I think the problem with the fall, well, what I would consider the fall of philosophy is just that, like you said, people don't may be aware of the current circumstance, but they aren't aware of the first principles part of it. They may have beliefs, and maybe their belief is to challenge everything. But challenging everything doesn't also it also is not conducive to a thriving society all the time because there are these ideas that we develop, like we talked about before, that we essentially make up for the purpose of having a thriving society. And so, if you're challenging them constantly, just on no basis, then that could also lead to dismantling or disruption, right? I would have just like equated to like we all have phones, and so they have these planned updates. Well, imagine if you opened your phone every day, and it was an update that completely changed every app that you used every single day. It's like you can't get any consistency. You can't have any actual, you know, um,
Yeah.
use of the app because it's always changing. You kind of needed to have some shape or form that you know how to operate and you can use in your life. It's applicable, I guess I would say, and apply it. So it's just, but I love the idea of challenging things. I think that that's a good thing. I think that that's an opportunity, especially with if you have the youth that's challenging things today. But we also have to have someone to present an argument
Yeah.
that presents a holistic argument that says, "Hey, there are some reasons why we do some of these things, and we don't just challenge just arbitrarily. We need to challenge based on some foundational principles."
Yeah, that's really important because a lot of times, especially with like the financial situation that our country's in today, it's very easy for a young person to fall into like communist style thinking. And
Right.
like that, there's nothing more dangerous to me than like a bunch of young communists just pissed off about the world. And like they're they're right they're right to be pissed off about the way the world is today. Like there is I think we're on the verge of a massive housing crisis. We've got so many houses on the market and nobody can afford to buy the damn things. You've got people who are saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans that they're never going to be able to pay off, with degrees that
Right.
they're never going to be able to use. Like you can go on to Twitter and see video after video of young people just complaining and crying and just broken up about how much student debt they've got, and they're working at like TJ Maxx or something like that. And, they've got
Right.
they're paying more interest than they are on their loan altogether. And they're, kind of sold into buying these loans at 17, 16, even. Like these kids have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And like I
Right.
understand that. Like it's a screwed up world. And I think that it's really important, especially from a financial standpoint, to explain like why you are getting screwed financially. It can't just be that capitalism is the enemy. Like you have to go like, look, this is not the fault of capitalism. We do have
Right.
some screwed up, corporations that are running a lot of things, but that's not a function of capitalism. That's a function of government. The government prints the money and they give it to their cronies, to their friends. They get cheap, easy loans that they're, able to gamble with on the stock market. And like inflation is the true enemy of the American people, not capitalism. And I don't think that's explained at all. Like, I learned nothing about economics while I was in high school. Like, we learned
Right.
absolutely nothing. Like, we didn't even have a class on economics. And when I got to college, like, I took a class on economics. And I remember in my macroeconomics class, they had a section on the boom and bust cycles. And it was like a paragraph. They were like, this is what the boom and bust cycle is. They didn't explain at all why they happen,
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
like how you could fix them. And I don't think that's by accident. I think that people are not supposed to learn about these things because the government needs to be able to print the money without people pushing back in any way. And I don't know
Mm.
what's going to happen in the next 20 years as the boomers all start dying off and we have all of this available housing with nobody that's capable of buying it. Like, I would imagine these massive corporations are gonna buy up a lot of it, but essentially, like, even at the prices that these homes are going for today, kids aren't gonna be able to rent them anyways, so it's not like it's going
Mm.
to do them all make them a ton of money by, like, buying up all of this expensive housing at the current pricing levels and then, like, renting them out to a public that can't afford that either. So,
Yeah.
like, I think that we're I think that at some point in the near future, we're gonna have a massive financial crisis that makes 2008 look like a blip.
I mean, it's quite possible, right? I think that there's definitely some type of bubble. Um, I guess, hmm, I guess the way the way I try to look at this is like from a long term standpoint, right? Because I don't know if I would agree that I think the higher ups don't want people to know. I think it's just I think it's kind of like a some type of a byproduct of the way people go about life. It's kind of like looking at the short term and bypassing the long term view of things. And I
Yeah,
think it's just you just
high
get
time
this.
preference thinking.
You say what again?
High
Sorry.
time preference thinking, you
Oh
know?
yeah, yeah. So you just get this. It's just happening over and over and over, short term, short term, short term, and then nobody ever looks and says, "Oh, we've got a dam full of cracks in it." And then what all people try to do after that is just, well, let's just patch up the crack, patch up the crack, patch up the crack, instead of how about we fix this thing fundamentally? And for me, like dealing with philosophy or and just these concepts and these ideas, it takes a lot to sit back and look at everything as a system and try to present a holistic view of, hey, some of the things that people believe are actually responsible for the ills that we see. Like I make one of the cases in my book is just that, people have issues with the government. You say they have the right or they should be having issues with the government. That's in many ways that's true. But what they'll do a lot of times is argue for the government to have more power to
Mhm,
fix the problem. And then if the government gets more power to fix the problem, then you've given up your personal power to fix the problem, and therefore you've exacerbated the problem. You made the problem worse
mhm.
by trying to get the government involved in the problem. And so it becomes this loop over and over and over again where people think that they're doing a good thing by involving more government. But the actual outcome of that is people or government officials being able to deal with the people who they want to deal with and things like that.
Yeah,
So,
man, there's some really good, like, anti-war leftists that I respect a lot on the internet that do like Jimmy Dore. I think Jimmy Dore is really good at identifying problems, and he's very funny, so, like, he's a fun guy to watch. But then you get to his solutions, and it's like, we need more government. We need Medicare for everybody, like, we can't
right.
just have this, and it's like, man, I don't know how I just listened to you talk about how corrupt the government is for an hour, and then your answer is, "We just need more of it." And that
Right.
happens on the right as well, like, it's not just a function of the left, like, the right will tell you about how, especially right now, "Oh, the FBI is corrupt, and they went after Trump, and blah, 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 blah about the FBI and the CIA." But what we really just need to do is vote good people in. So then these institutions will be good. And it's like, no, guys, these institutions are rotten from the core. Like they've been running our country for 40, 50 years now. Like since JFK was murdered, the CIA has essentially been in charge of the country. Like the
Mm.
president is a short-term employee. He's not actually running things. And it's yeah,
Yeah.
man, it's so frustrating to see that, especially with like people who are so good at identifying problems. It's like, how can you identify the problem so well? It's like if a surgeon went in and was like, "Oh, you've got a broken arm. We need to fix that broken arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to break your arm up here as well. So that way you're not going to notice the pain down here." you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but that's a constant. Like, even some of the great thinkers that I even think about, like, they do a great job of identifying the issues, and then sometimes you get to the conclusion, and it's like, "Oh, wow, I don't that doesn't match your solution doesn't match the problem." Um, which, I mean, I think it just I mean, that's kinda what I'm trying to offer with the book, right? It's just the core basic principles to just say even down to the morals of it, where people say, "Well, we need," you know, let's just say, universal health care. Well, where does where does this money supposed to come from? Or we
Print
just
more.
get it. You know, we just get, oh, let's say you just say we print more, and you say, oh, there's no money out of your pocket. Well, wait, doesn't printing more money end in inflation? A lot, like hyperinflation and things like that.
Yeah.
Then it's like a blank out. It's like, well, we don't know. Well, that's not our problem. Whose problem do you think it is? Like, these are basic, simple questions. Like, I'm not like sitting up here trying to be. I'm not. No, I'm not some genius or something. I'm just asking basic questions. Where does the money come from? Okay, what's going to happen as a result of spending it or printing this money? Wouldn't that be a bad thing for us, or wouldn't that be taken from somebody else's pocket? Is that a moral thing to do? And so these are basic, simple questions to me that have to be answered. And because I think a lot of people avoid answering these questions, then you leave this leeway for other people to have these ridiculous conversations on ridiculous grounds. It's like this is easily refutable. Why are we even having this conversation? Because people don't want to speak up and just say, "Look, this is blatantly wrong based upon this principle or this foundational
Yeah.
idea."
I was talking with somebody in my family that's a smart person, very smart, works for the Supreme Court. And we were talking about inflation. And I go, wait a minute. Do you know what inflation means? And she's like, well, yeah, it means prices are going up. I go, no, no, no. Well, why are prices going up? Uh, well, you know, no
Yeah,
idea. And I'm just like, it's because we're
yeah,
printing money, and people don't understand that like the the act of printing money debases the currency that you already have. And it's like it's not that hard to understand, really. Like once you understand
not
that the
really.
money is fake and we print it because it helps the people in charge. I had another conversation recently with somebody in my family that was a cop that has this black and white way of thinking. The government just does what they're going to do, and I remember we were talking about Bitcoin actually, and he goes, "Oh, the government's gonna make it go away soon." And I go, "You don't know anything about Bitcoin. Like, what are you talking about?"
Right.
And I go, that the government just approved like an ETF for BlackRock or something like that. This was a year or so ago. He goes, "Oh, that doesn't matter," and this and that and blah blah blah. And I go, "Wait a minute. Who do you think is actually in charge? The government or the billionaires?" "Well, the government's in charge." I'm like, "Really? You think that the billionaires are gonna just let the government push them around?" It's like, no. The billionaires allowed them to collect taxes because this system works very well for them. They get, access to cheap, easy money as soon as it's printed. They're able to buy up all the assets, and the act of inflation increases the prices of their assets. Like this system works for them. If they decided that they didn't like the system the way it was, you can bet your ass that it would change on a dime, because those are the people that
Mm.
are actually in charge of this country, is the people with billions of dollars. And like
Uh,
this isn't hard to understand once you kind of get the principles of like what inflation is, why it's being done the way it's being done, like the government
mhm.
couldn't pay for all of these endless wars and ridiculous like corporate bailouts if they had to back the money with like a hard currency like gold, which is why they took us off the gold standard, is because you could
Yeah.
not pay for the Vietnam War if you had to back every dollar that you were spending with gold. And like again with like the Federal Reserve, which is like one of the biggest scams in history. It's not federal and it's not a reserve, but it's a great name to make people think that like this is some government agency that's like responsible for the money, and some just agency that's
Yeah.
doing anything. It's like, no, these are like this is a central bank of the United States where the billionaires are calling the shots. Like these 12 people get to decide the entire financial future for billions of people. And it's like, it's not just the United States that is affected by the Federal Reserve. Like, imagine if you were
Right.
just some poor Mexican living in some town down in Mexico, and you go to the store one day and all of a sudden eggs are double the price. And you go, what the hell happened? Why are the eggs more expensive? I don't know. Some asshole in America did something.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think so the way I look at this is that I think people, maybe even like yourself, who understand these issues, it's like 2 lanes for me. There's one that's the educational lane, right? Where you can help people who don't understand increase their understanding, and that's one part of being helpful. But then there's another lane, in my opinion, where, and this is why I wrote my book. I actually wrote it for leaders, right, and philosophers, because you can get caught up in conversations that aren't going to go anywhere, and therefore, it, like, diminishes your point. And I always want to have conversations that are like building all of the time. And you do need to have a conversation with someone at some kind of a minimum or basic level of understanding, because you're trying to get to a higher understanding of things. Whereas though when you start having conversations with people who don't fully understand inflation at all, or you have conversations with people who have an emotional or some type of feeling bias towards more government, or you know more protection or collective nature or something like that, you know you don't really, in all honesty, you don't need the backing of those people. Like, the many people don't, like, the people don't run the populace doesn't run things like people may think that they do. I think that's the argument that you're making
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
You know,
And
like the
so,
two-party system is a way for them to control power. They make you think that you're gonna get
yeah,
something by your team winning, which is ridiculous because both like when it comes down to it, they're gonna fight over a couple social issues, but they're always together on the major issues like war and monetary policy. Like maybe
mm.
one side wants to tax you 35% and the other wants to tax you 45%. But like for the most part, when it comes down to the major issues like war and money, they're always gonna be on the same side.
Yeah, and so to me, what you get to when you go through like these philosophical arguments, you start to understand that there's a collective mentality. It's all rooted in like a collective. That's what Jung would call a primitive, more primitive, on the primitive side of, with the of cognitive activity. I would guess I would say, call it. Maybe that's kind of generic, but there's just this tendency for people to identify with others, and it's almost like you can't differentiate. There's no individual. So to kind of just give a little bit of a background on the book,
Yeah.
I looked at two systems of thought. One is based in psychology, that's Carl Jung. The other one is based in philosophy, that's Ayn Rand. And basically, I'm taking Carl Jung's system of psychology and examining Ayn Rand's system of philosophy, in a sense. And essentially, what you start to see in Carl Jung's work is that, you know, the whole idea of an individual, when we talk about America, we talk about a country that's built around the individual. That's a fairly new idea. Like, this does an individual didn't people weren't acknowledged and recognized as individuals all throughout history. Like, some people were just part of the group.
Mhm.
That's just how it was. That's I mean, most people were, except for like maybe the kings and nobles or
Yeah.
whatever like that.
Serfs.
Yeah. And so this whole idea of everyone having individual independence and having individual rights, that is really a fairly new thing. And that comes along with a whole different set of philosophical principles and psychology that goes along with that. And a lot of people still aren't there yet. So the whole point I'm trying to make is that, okay, if we want to be educated and we want to be intellectual about our problems and approach them that way, we have to use what we know about within psychology to understand that, yeah, most people, for many, if not most, people identify themselves with other. It's like a concrete
Mhm.
mentality. That's what call it in the book. Young calls it concretistic. And they can't necessarily differentiate themselves from others. So basically, I can tell you what to do with your resources, and it doesn't stir up any like cognitive dissonance alerts in my brain. Whereas though, as two different individuals are interacting with each other, they would say, "Well, you have your stuff, and I have my stuff, and so we can agree to combine our resources. But I just can't tell you what to do with your resources. I have to, try to persuade you. I can't coerce you." But you understand, with that collective mentality, and it's like even people like Eric Fromm would talk about it. It's like kind of relates to what they call an authoritative. personality or the authoritarian character, it's just not it doesn't trick anything to them. It's just very much like, no, my stuff is your stuff and your stuff is my stuff, and we should do this to do the war. We should take these taxes because it's our money. We should do this because it's our communities.
Hmm.
Wait, these are individuals. You can't just tell people what to do, but that's the difference that we're seeing between these two different mindsets.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that they just can't connect because of that simple basis.
Yeah, collectivism's a disease. They're always talking about our democracy, and our democracy is just another word for our hegemony. And like that's why, in 2008, you had a bunch of right wingers and a bunch of left wingers all screaming at the banks that we are the 99%. And it's not an accident that immediately after that happened, all of this social bullshit started happening. They started siloing people off into groups. You're LGBTQ, or you're, a person of color, or you're white
Mm,
or whatever. Like they want people fighting as groups rather than identifying as individuals and,
mm.
coming together over
Values.
shared values, right? Like they
Yeah.
want to separate us by skin color or demographics. Like, are you rich or are you poor? Like they want to just silo people off into these groups so these groups fight with each other instead of going, hey, look, like most people agree on like 90% of things. And if we can come together on these 90% of things, then the other 10% of stuff can be sorted out later. And,
Right.
like, talking about Ayn Rand, like, I have a lot of respect for Ayn Rand because she did something that very few people are capable of doing. She wrote books that were entertaining and educational at the same time. It's really hard to
Mm.
get somebody to sit down and read a book about philosophy or economics. Like even
Right.
myself, like I have a hard time reading books about economics. It's boring and it's hard to like keep your mind engaged on it, and it's hard to remember all of the crap that you're talking and actually like digest and figure it out. But like if you
Right.
can take that philosophy and put it into a book or a movie or a song, like punk rock is great at this, as kind of explaining things through music. Like people are more apt to like understand it and engage with it, and you're able to reach a much larger audience than like, it's really hard to get somebody to like, hey, you want to learn about libertarian or Austrian economics? Here's a 2,000-page book
Yeah.
written by an
Yeah.
Austrian guy 100 years ago. Like, that's a really tough ask to get people to read and digest and understand. Like, even myself, like I said, I have a hard time reading these books, and that's one of the things that, like, excites me a bit about AI is that an average person is going to be able to, like, write a short story and
Mm.
put it into an AI engine and create some short movie that you can put on YouTube that millions of people can watch and like actually understand the subject that you're talking about without having to sit down and read these books. And like
Yeah.
if you can do a series of these things. Like I know they made a movie about Atlas Shrugged and it was awful. I don't know if you ever watched
Terrible.
it, but
It's a horrible
it
movie.
was just awful. And like they changed the actors like throughout. It was just one of the
Yeah.
worst adaptations I have ever seen. But like
Yeah.
you could do it now if you have, the ability, and if you know Ayn Rand and you're able to use these AI engines, you could do a series of 10-minute movies, 1,000 of them, however many it would take. I don't know to do Atlas Shrugged, but I think you could probably condense it to a couple hours if you really tried and you were really good at it. And like, I think that we need to get better about writing and creating things that are artistic and entertaining rather than just like dull and boring like here's what I think about things, and
I
like I think
I
we're
agree.
very close to that.
I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that Rand talks about this from her, you know, basically her philosophy is metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. So for me, the way that I understand it is just the movie version, the visuals. That's more of a concrete picture. It's almost like when we think about hieroglyphics. I went to the Met in New York not too long ago, And so I guess I don't know what it is, a tomb or a mosque they transported from Africa into the Met. And basically it was this moment in time that they put the image, somebody came and um sacrificed or donated something to these two brothers. But it's just the images on the tomb or whatever it's supposed to be was supposed to capture that moment. And I guess that kind of like it's a way of writing with visuals and it
Mhm,
connects to people more. That's pretty much the point that I'm trying to make to you. Because people understand that from a standpoint of, oh, I understand that. You know, I look like this, that person looks like this. They brought that. I've had that experience or something like that. Whereas the words in books, yes, this is very conceptual, right? It's very abstract. And I think sometimes it does confuse um because it's just this weird thing with words. Words and ideas are very they illuminate, and this is my opinion, right?
mhm.
So I can get better understanding if I'm using words, but to apply or be able to communicate it for some people is it makes better sense to have a concrete visual because that way all of the ideas come together as one. I mean, Rand talks about this when she's talking about her characterization and her plots and everything. It's like instead of having all of these words like you're talking about, it's like people just realize it in one moment. Everything that you could have wrote in 100-page book, they just recognized it in 1 second just because they identify with the character and identify with the situation. So I think they're both needed, right?
Yeah.
But I just think that without without the conceptual basis, it's very easy to go off the rails when you're doing the concrete presentation of the visual because it takes on a life of its own. And yeah, I can leave it right there, but that's my thought about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, so Tom Woods is a great thinker. He's a libertarian. He's an economist and a history major. Like, he's a historian, and he
Mhm.
wrote a book called oh man, I don't remember what it's called now off the top of my head. It's like one of these idiots' guides to American history type of thing. And
Okay.
it's an easy read. Like, I've read the book before. It's an easy read and it's easy to get through and you get a lot out of it. But what he did was him and this guy Michael Malice, who's also a great anarchist thinker, very funny. He's a troll on Twitter. Like, if you've never
I think
ran
I've
into him
seen this guy.
before, you should check
Yeah.
his work out. He's very very smart, very entertaining. And they went and did a series of cartoons on the book. So they went through every chapter of the book and did like a 10-minute cartoon based on it. And it's funny. And, Tom ends up in a dress in like almost every one of the videos because they're just having fun with it. And it's an
Right.
easy way to like show a young person, like, here is the history of the United States and that you can watch in like an hour and a half. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, it's funny, and it's a lot easier than to get like a young person to engage with a cartoon on YouTube rather than like sit down and read this book about American history, which, like you said, like most people don't want to do. Like, most people are just want to go watch the baseball game instead of like
Yeah.
actually learn about history and things like that.
Yeah, true. I mean, I definitely agree. I agree with you, right? I, what I would just add is I think some of the people who deal with the more foundational conceptual piece, I think it should serve as the bedding
Yeah.
for more of what you're talking about. So, yes, do more music, do more videos, do more stuff, but have it rooted in something. That's the only thing,
Yeah, it's
right?
like source material. You gotta have the
Right.
source material, understand the source material, and then take that material and create something for the
Right.
masses, right? Like, I think
Right.
I I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that this is true. Like, I don't really know a lot about the church, but I know, like, for a very, very long time, majority of the population did not know how to read. And one of the ways that like the church was able to get people to kind of have a moral compass and a moral backbone was they created art within the churches. They took the scriptures and they created art, stained glass, like I've never
Mhm.
been to Italy and seen any of the great art from Michelangelo, but like those are ways
Yeah.
that the masses were able to like understand these concepts that are in a Bible that they aren't capable of reading.
Yeah. I never thought well, probably thought about that a little bit. I mean, I have been in Italy once and seen a lot of the art. But yeah, it does communicate. You don't it cuts right through. Right, it cuts right through without the words, without the, "Oh, what does that mean, and what does this mean?" You know exactly what it means. You see it, or you experience it, I would say. And one of the things and I just introduced this thing because I used another one. I mean, I used several of Rand's essays in the book to juxtaposing his psychology. And one of them was The Romantic Manifesto, where she talks about art. And it's just about that, cutting through with art and how art is a represent it's almost like it's a representation of a person's metaphysics, basically how they see the world. Like the way everything that's on the page or everything that's in your artwork is something that you created. And so whatever is there, you put it there. And so that's a representation of how you see the world. And so gets into how some people see the world in a negative way and some people see the world in a positive, optimistic way. But it just gets to that root of the essence of a person, how they present their art.
Yeah. Michael Malice, the guy I was talking about a few minutes ago, he's a big Ayn Rand fan, and during COVID, he live streamed a bunch of her appearances on Donahue. Have you ever watched any of
Oh, yeah,
those?
yeah, yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah, I
that's
saw one of
entertaining.
them.
That was great. One of the things that like really stuck out to me about that, and this is like kind of going in a different direction again, but I remember in one of the episodes, like kids in the audience were freaking out about monopolies. And they were talking about this company that I'd never heard of before. And they're like, "Oh, this is a monopoly." And she's just like, "Yeah, yeah, but the companies come and go and like, don't worry about it,"
Right.
type of thing. And like, here we are 30 years later. I don't know when those episodes were. They might have been 50 years ago in the
80s.
70s for all I know. But like that company doesn't exist anymore. And I'd never even heard of it. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I mean, but I think to your point, a lot of the monopolies that we see are government created monopolies.
Yep.
I mean, almost any. I think the argument from an objectivist argument, and I'm not an objectivist expert here, but that argument is that all monopolies are created by the government.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a free, when if you have a free country that operates on free markets, the people choose who get the money. But when you have these government restrictions and mandates and things like that, that's the government funneling the money to who they want the money to go to. So, therefore, you can create these monopolies by mandating people to do this or that,
Yep.
or spend your money here so we know where it's going.
Yep. Like, so I did line work. I worked on power lines when I got hurt. And like there's no more like glaring like example of a monopoly than power companies. You're not allowed to start your own power company. Like, could you
Right.
imagine like you live in California and the government puts out some edict or mandate like we're going to change to all electric vehicles by 2030 or whatever the year they s- they
Yeah.
put on it. And then the next week they're like, please don't charge your electric cars. We don't have the energy for it. And it's like, I was also a bartender before I did line work. So I always give the example of like, imagine if you went to a bar on Super Bowl Sunday and all of a sudden at halftime they go, hey, look, we don't have enough beer for everybody. So if you guys want more beer, we'll go buy another keg from a different bar but or from a different supplier, but you're gonna have to pay 50% more for your beers. And you're sitting there and you go, wait a minute, that's stupid. Why would this bar not stock enough beer for Super Bowl Sunday? I should go start my
Right.
own bar. No, no, no. The government will not let you do it. Like there's just
Right.
not gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of people can't think outside of that realm, right? It's just not just pulling from a book that I'm reading recently. It's just like it's not a part of some people's emotional experience.
Yeah.
Creation is not a part of their emotional experience. What is is always going to be, and to believe that there is anything ever anything else ever going to happen is crazy for them.
Yeah.
Which the creative mind does not think like that. The individual mind does not, the pioneer, the maverick, they don't think like that. They always think in terms of opportunities. What can I take from what I've just learned and make something new? And that is the story of the prosperity of the country in a nutshell. But people want to tamp that down because they're like, well, these people are making money. Well, that was
Yeah.
the point. Like that was the
Yeah.
whole point, to come up with something and make the money. And then when somebody else comes up with a new idea and I got to fight for my position, that's just how capitalism works and free markets work. And this is how the consumer benefits. This is how the labor market benefits. If you just get out of the way, and but people just have to have their little fingers in everything
Yeah.
because they're just afraid everything is going to fall if their mediocre mind that doesn't have some type of, control over it.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's
Yeah,
crazy
it's
to me.
funny. Like in the last 50 years, 40 maybe even 30, like the greatest thing in the history of the world has happened, which is like we've been able to bring 40% of the world out of abject poverty through free market
Mm.
capitalism and access to cheap energy. And like people don't notice that in America because we're screwed over by monopolies and ridiculous financial, problems and not even like problems, they're manufactured problems. This is like problems that that shouldn't exist but do because the ruling elite wants to own the money and like that's the only thing that we really know. There's like two things that we know for sure about the government and the future of this country. One is they're not going to stop printing money and two is they're not going to stop going to war because everybody's used
Mm.
to having free and cheap loans. Like they're going to keep interest rates at near zero because that's allows the casino atmosphere and allows the rich people to take out loans and buy different, hard assets, whether it's housing or gold or Bitcoin, like whatever they want to buy, like they're going to take out loans and they're going to use other people's money. Like that's what the rich people do is they don't get rich off of their own money. They get rich off of other people's money. And, then you start blaming capitalism and you go, well, wait a minute, look at over like what's happened in Africa and China and India. Like there's sure there's still poor people there, but like the majority of those people have been brought out of poverty because of capitalism. Even China, like where they have this weird communist system, like they didn't bring all of these people out of abject poverty through communism. It was because they opened up to capitalism a little bit more.
I mean, that's true, right? But what I would say, I would always try to focus on the positive and the leading part of all of that. And I think Rand and the objectivism movement, they talk about this a lot. The whole issue of bringing people out of poverty is a byproduct of a moral premise. And the moral premise is your life is the end in itself. It's yours to do what you want to do with, right? And so therefore it's moral for you to, take your labor and, sell it, and or the products that you make and sell it and make money from it. And what's implicit, I guess, in the other view is that no, it's not yours. See, you sell the stuff and it's ours to divvy up. And I think my goal in all of this is to try to simplify these stories, because I think a lot of people get caught up in the, oh, but this didn't happen in this country and look at
Yeah.
the poverty rate here. And it's like all of this could or couldn't be true. But at the end of the day, my life is it's an end in itself. And it's my moral right to do with my life what I want to do with it. And if you want to challenge me on that, at least it makes the conversation simple enough to whereas no, you're challenging my right to do with my property or the fruits of my labor, my product, what I want. And that's a simpler conversation.
Yeah.
That's what I always try to bring it to.
Your life has meaning. It's not just, this thing that you do. Your
Yeah.
work has actual meaning. Like we're in this system that's built to just grind people down. And they're cogs in a machine. A lot of people are just cogs in the machine. And I
Yeah.
think that they get ground down so much that they think that their life no longer has meaning and that whatever they're doing every day is just meaningless. All it is just going through a series of motions to kind of help somebody else, but not really help themselves. And like, I think a lot of that can be placed on like college, where people are sold this lie that if you don't go to college, you're going to be a loser and you're never going to have a great life or anything like that. But like, doing line work, like what I was doing, like there's meaning in that. You're able to produce something that helps people in a way that like very few jobs can actually, help people in that same way. Like we need energy for every part of our country. The
Yeah.
basis of production is energy. If you don't have energy, you can't do anything. And like there's meaning in that. And that's, something that you don't have to go to college for and you don't have to be a cog in a machine. You can go out and use your brain and use your body and actually produce something with some meaning and go home at night and go, not only did I earn for my family and make my life better, my wife and my kids' lives better, but like we were able to help other people in the process. And like there's very few jobs out there right now, just normal jobs where you can go home and sit down and go like I did something today.
But what I would say to your first point, like I always try to think of it in a progressive way, like life in itself. Because when we were talking in the beginning, like we make a lot of this stuff up, or we make all of it up.
Yeah.
And I always try to think of it like not that people have a loss of meaning. They never develop the understanding of meaning, right? Because if I equate like a child to caveman or someone, a Homo sapien. Like this, the whole idea of meaning and individuals, that stuff is foreign to them. So for us to bring them up and just to teach them in ways to say, hey, you can create, it's almost like the expectation is to create meaning. That's the whole expectation, right? And so if you set that groundwork, then to me, that's a better fertile land for them to be able to sprout up and to develop meaning. Um, and I think what has happened is just that we fail to bring kids up to that point to where as though they see meaning in anything. They just see it as a set of actions, just,
Means to an
oh, I
end.
have to go to work.
Yeah.
It's just I'm going to work, I'm getting married, I'm having a kid, look at this. I'm doing the stuff that I'm supposed to do. And that's not an individual approach in life. That's not somebody that's, individuated from what like in a Jungian standpoint. And so I think we need to do a better job of that. Just as older people and people who have lived and learned and developed the wisdom to set the groundwork for a child to have to grow up in the society, educators, intellectuals, all of those people to develop them along their way to where as though they can see the meaning in what they do. And this is not so for me, this is like a personal point because when I grew up in like a Christian background, no longer affiliated with that stuff. I mean, not don't go to church and anything like that now. But what I would say is that it's there is value in anything you do to produce and take care of yourself,
Mhm.
right? And so I don't care what you do personally. If you're doing work and you're getting income from that work and you're able to take care of yourself, you're a self-sustaining human being. And so therefore with me, you get respect just because you're not somebody asking me to pay for your life.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, like, people need to develop some agency, and take control of their lives and make decisions for themselves. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that have no agency at this point, where they're just a slave to, you know, whatever stupid job they're working or alcohol or drugs. Like, you gotta have some agency and take control of your life.
Yeah. You gotta make the world. That's what you literally have to make the world. That's what we have to do.
Yep. Damien, this has been fun. Tell everybody where they can buy your
Great.
book. Get out of
I
here.
said Amazon.com, America's Ethical Archetype. It's establishing the psychology of moral authority and correcting our country's broken politics. You can catch me at Damien T. Dubose, DAMIENTDUBOSE.com. That's my website. I'm on like all of the Facebooks and Instagrams and everything. Damien T. Dubose, or I don't even know. Damien T. Dubose should find you, or Damien T. Dubose.
It'll all be
Uh,
down in the description. So just click on
okay.
everything and take over and go buy some books. All right, Damien, this has been a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.